Hi, Hi everyone. Good morning, and thank you all for taking the time to come here. I know it's the second day of the conference, so everyone's a little tired. So hopefully, we'll be able to do something exciting for you. So today, what I want to talk about is not so much about VNG or Zalo or Zing, but actually just how do we choose games to come to the Vietnam market, right? We have a lot of games in Vietnam right now. You've got games from the West, from America, from Europe, from Korea, from China, Japan, from Vietnam. And what are the best games that we look at, and how do we look at them? What criteria do we use to choose them, right? So first of all, we've got three different things we look at when we're trying to choose a game to come to Vietnam from VNG. And the first thing we do, of course, is we look at what are we good at? What is VNG good at? And I promised Max I will only do advertising for Zalo for 2 slides. So I'm only going to talk about it for about a couple of minutes. So first of all, VNG is a platform company. We used to be called Vina Game, but now we changed our name to VNG to emphasize that we also do platforms, we do entertainment, we do music, we do TV, we do social. And what we do is we get a lot of users to enter these platforms and use them for free. And in games and potentially e-commerce and advertising are all our ways of monetizing our users, right? So for us, we've got Zing TV and MP3, Zing Me for social, and we have a live streaming website. It's kind of like Twitch in the West, and in China they have YY, so it's sort of watching League of Legends tournaments or StarCraft tournaments on there, and you have people singing competitions as well, and just doing comedies. And lastly, what we have is Zalo, right? And I think everyone is familiar with KakaoTalk, WeChat, and Line. Those are the big social platforms in Korea, Taiwan, China, and Thailand, Japan. And what they did very well is that they monetized themselves through gaming, right? Especially in Vietnam, where e-commerce hasn't taken off and the advertising industry for online is still very small. Gaming is the easiest, most effective way to give users more content and a good experience, and at the same time make a little money, right? So number two, what we look at is, of course, the Vietnam market, right? So you can see from our products, we have a lot of users. So and therefore, we look for games that potentially can reach a wide base of different users, and not just like we only play a farming game or we only play a fighting game. We want games that are attractive to everybody, right? And I'll talk more about that later. So this is probably the part that people will be most interested in, and I probably spent the most time preparing for, is the Vietnam market. And how big is the Vietnam market? I would say that the Vietnam market is about the size of the rest of the Southeast Asian markets put together, which is for gaming, which is around 200 to 300 million US dollars by my estimates, and growing quite quickly. And that's about a quarter the size of the Taiwan market. And Taiwan has probably 25 million people. So you see where the potential is in a market like Vietnam, which has almost 100 million people. And there you go. Smartphones, 33 million by rough estimates. And this number is going to grow really, really fast by the end of this year and next year. And I'll give you some numbers to show you. I don't know if you guys can see, but we look at this is smartphone penetration in Vietnam right now. And we are, as of 2014, we're around 30%, right? So around 30 million smartphones. This year, we see that as there's more and more selection of cheaper phones, especially on the Android market, you can get a really high top-notch phone for maybe just 100 to 200 US dollars. We see more and more people able to afford not just one, but 2 or 3 phones, right? And we hope that they will use these phones to play more games, and that's very good for all of us here, right? Sorry, I'm trying to really get through this on time, right? Because I know everyone's hungry. Next is the age group. I think this is very important when you're coming from either the West or Japan, Korea, China. Is you come to Vietnam and you realize, wow, 60% of smartphones users are under 25 years old. So the average age of Vietnam is generally even close to more than 5 years compared to Japan and Korea, and maybe 3 or 4 years compared to China. So you can see that the user base is very young. So that's why when people say, okay, why isn't payment as strong for Vietnam as other markets? Well, I think you're just waiting for people to come of age, right? It's kind of like the real estate market, where right now, the people who are young are still too young to buy housing because they're not getting married, having kids yet. And the older people don't need it because they already have it. So you might have to wait 2 or 3 years. So I kind of look at the mobile market, not just for gaming, but for e-commerce and other payments, O2O, in the same way, is that you're going to have a lot of people with smartphones and habits, and as soon as their income increases and they do better stages in their lives, we're going to see a big boom. And I think it's going to start at the end of this year or early next year. So it was a good choice by Max and the GMGC team to do this conference this year in Vietnam. Next, of course, we got to talk about games, because that's what everyone loves and cares about. Is that the mobile game market, you can see, has been growing with pretty ridiculous speed, right? We feel that in 2015, it's going to hit $100 million, right? And that's small when you look at it compared to the Northeast Asia or Western markets, but you see the potential for growth in that it's going to grow at between 50 to 100% for the next 3 or 4 years, and that's pretty astounding. So we see that some of the big reasons are going to come from the fact that, okay, we're going to have a big income growth as well. You're going to have dividends from the rising age of the population, the low cost of the smartphones, and especially 3G. 3G is probably the cheapest anywhere in the world, right? Probably $3 or $4 US. You can get unlimited data, and the young population. Okay, anybody more pictures? Okay, so next, now this is a really important piece of data that we found when we looked at our users. So how many mobile gamers are there? Right, we know how many smartphone users are there, but how many of them actually play mobile games? And we see that in Vietnam, the proportion of people who do play games is actually higher than a lot of other markets, right? Especially you look at the casual game market as well, not just for Candy Crush, but if you look at some of the numbers of downloads for games like Talking Tom or Talking Angela, or a lot of these English language casual games, they're pretty impressive. You can just go to Google Play and Apple and you will see. So we feel that the number of mobile gamers will be around 10 to 15 million. Okay, right now, and 13 million is the number we kind of reached that will come at this year. So that's a little more than 1/3 of smartphone users. And I think on PC, it's around a similar number, right? It's around a similar ratio of total internet users and game users. And the next slide is what really makes us kind of interesting, is that if you look at, and then we did this for Taiwan and Korea as well too, but I think China is the market that's closest to Vietnam in terms of development of mobile games. And if you see in 2012 to 2013, the number of mobile gamers increased by about 200 million, right? So it tripled, right? And we see that growth is exactly happening now from 2015 to 2016, is that the number of mobile gamers is going to see the biggest level of increase of all the past years so far. And you can see in China in that first year, the mobile game revenue didn't grow very much, right? And you can see that this year mobile game revenue is going to grow, but it's going to be just like last year, probably 50%. So what we feel is that if you look at China in 2013, 2014, well, you got less growth in mobile gamers, but the growth in revenue nearly tripled as well. So usually it'll sort of like be maybe 6 months to 1 year later, you'll see the actual really revenue coming from the growth of mobile gamers, and you'll see more and more selection of games as well. So for us, we've really pinpointed late this year and early next year as a really big explosive point for Vietnam. And if I'm right, if I'm right, I'm definitely gonna give. Well, made a bet with one of the guys at our company about the size of the mobile game revenue. So it's for a lot of drinks. So if you guys are interested, at the end of the year, you can come visit VNG and come out with us. So lastly is, so what about the gamers, right? What do the gamers like? I think this is a really important thing as well, because in the past, many people have said, okay, this game is making, $80 million in Japan, right? So, okay, you divide it by like 50 or something, and it'll make $1 or $2 million in Vietnam, right? This makes $30 million in China, so it can make $500,000 in Vietnam. Obviously, as we learn more and more, and we pay a lot of tuition, we find out that's often not the case, right? So what we're trying to do now is here, we're looking at, okay, what are the kind of themes that Vietnamese players like? And what are the kind of styles of gameplay that Vietnamese users like? And this is really, really similar to our PC numbers, but also slightly different, because as you know, for mobile, when you do a lot of action games, for the controlling, it's not very convenient, right? So if you look at the left side, and I know it's really small, we have a category called Life, and when we say Life, it's a rough translation. It actually just means just the standard like Clash of Clans, or Farmville, or Heyday, kind of Western general people, a sort of art style, right? So that's a lot of the casual games. Candy Crush, right? We calculate that as Life, right? But those are not the games that often have the highest revenue, right? The ones with the highest revenues, as you see, are we've got some sort of Western fantasy, like Dragons, Game of Thrones kind of games, as well as martial arts games, right? Sort of classic, kung fu games with a strong IP as well. And then after that, you have some Three Kingdoms and Japanese manga, fantasy westward journey kind of themes as well in Vietnam. So you can see that a lot of the Asian art styles, such as Three Kingdoms or Western arts or manga, is sort of very popular in Vietnam, as well as the Western. So this is kind of an interesting theme, because if you look at markets like China or Japan, they're predominantly, for example, in China, it'd be mainly martial arts themed, would be huge ratio compared to Western. Whereas in Japan also, Japanese anime themes is extremely huge. But in Vietnam, I think you have a good mix of a lot of genres being popular and a lot of different tastes among Vietnamese gamers. Next, which is very important, is if you look at how the play styles of the games. I think in Vietnam, it's what we found out, and all the others found out, is that RPGs are still the #1 games in terms of making money. And when I say RPGs, I'm talking about MMORPGs, like where you have a large world and you can see other gamers playing with you at the same time, and you've got a level gaining and level gaining up to level 200. Then you can rebirth and gain again. You got your pets, and you can pay for weapons and armor. And the really striking thing is that the RPGs that are popular here are the ones where you can sort of play automatically as well, right? Where you click on a mission and it'll take you there, and you can go directly to play the mission. You don't have to do too much coordination. Most of your skills will come from the fact that how you put your weapons and how you choose your skills and your formations and what teams you take with you, and most importantly, how much money you pay. Right? So those are sort of the games that are doing best in terms of revenue here, are MMORPGs, right? But in terms of the kind of games that people like to play, we see casual games being very strong. And we think that will be a huge potential in Vietnam, because right now all of the casual games in Vietnam are mostly Western ones, which do not have third-party payment. Meaning that in Vietnam, maybe only 2 to 3% of the people own credit cards. and can pay for iOS and Google official payment. The rest of the people use scratch cards or SMS or local bank cards. And so you will need a Vietnamese publisher to have their payment, third-party payment in for you. So you can see most of the Western games like Clash of Clans or Talking Tom or Candy Crush do not take the time to make a separate Vietnam package with third-party payments. But you can see that even though they don't do that, their casual games are in English, it's still very, very popular. So for VNG, because we have Zalo, which has a huge base of users, we're really looking forward to capitalize on this casual game market, where someone will be able to localize the game into Vietnamese language for us, integrate to our social features of Zalo, and integrate local payment as well. And hopefully then we will have some huge hits. And if you look at markets in Japan or China or Korea with Kakao, Line, and WeChat, the early hits, top market games were all casual games, right? Line Rangers and running games and Anypong. And lastly, of course, hardcore games like SLG games, card battle games like Hearthstone or other traditional games are also very popular here. And normally there's a lot of challenging between the gamers, so they're good for revenue. If you look at the top performing games in Vietnam, two of them are from VNG. You can see that majority of them here are, if you look at the bottom right, out of the top 10, most of them are martial arts based, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4 are martial arts. 5 are martial arts based. 1 is Dota themed. 1 is League of Legends themed. 1 is a casual airplane game, and 1 is a casual Korean dancing game, right? So these are what we feel are the highest revenue makers at the moment. I'm sure most of the other, which is funny is I'm sure most of the other big competitors, Apodo or Soha or VTC will think, hey, that's not the numbers we have. And that's the funny thing about the Vietnam market is that because everyone is using third-party payment, we cannot see, we don't know how much they're making because the Apple and Google charts mean nothing because they only record official payment made by credit cards. So the only way we can do it is we look for people who have switched between companies and say, hey buddy, how's your company doing? And what's your revenue? And then so we make guesses on that. And based on, for example, a number of servers that the game has, we can check that. We can check how much advertising they're doing and check how many users are playing the game. Right? So in Vietnam, it is still sort of a guessing game when you look at these kind of issues. But for us, we feel that these are the top games over here. And you can see the traditional, Asian martial arts themed and some of the, typical gaming IPs and potentially casual games are the big hits right now. Okay, so lastly, I talked about casual already, but I just kind of want to emphasize this because I know a lot of the people here actually have casual games. And I think they do casual very different in Asia than the Western market. And especially you look here, right? These are the 4 big chat apps that do games, right? Of course, Facebook Messenger and Viber and WhatsApp are huge, but they don't really do games. And if they do, well, that's a whole different ballgame. You look here at WeChat, they've got, the Match 3 game and the Kupao, the running game. And these games just, I think at a time they told us had 40 million daily active users, right? And that's ridiculous if you even think about the potential that brings. And the reason is because when you have a chat app, you're able to take advantage of the social things. Right? Remember Facebook, back when Zynga was very strong and Facebook didn't limit you to how many invites you could send to your friends? Yeah, Zynga was kicking butt. And it was spreading virally because you could see all your friends doing it. People are sending you requests for energy and help, and you get really annoyed, but eventually you click. Right? And then once Facebook stopped doing that, then Zynga sort of fell out of the whole sphere. So that's the big question for us, right? How much do we disrupt our user experience? How much are we going to be sending notifications and friend invites and for all these apps you also have a blog, like whether you call it moments or a journal page, right, where you see what your friends are updating as well, right? How much are we going to disrupt user experience in order to push our games. And that's sort of the big argument for us right now. And I'm sure all of these platforms have had the same thing. But I fundamentally believe if you look at the top downloaded games in all of these markets, you will see signs of these chat apps. And for us right now, we've only put on some internal VNG developed internal apps. One is Sky Garden, which is a huge IP in Vietnam. It's one of the most successful Vietnam games ever. And even was succeeded in China as well too, and went to the Japan market. And we put Who Wants to Be a Millionaire up there because everyone wants to be a millionaire. Well, in Vietnam, it's a trillionaire, right? So for us, we really are hoping for publishers to come to us and tell us, we have a great social casual game. We are interested in third-party payment and linking to your Zalo SDK and doing invite friends and share and friend requests and making a Vietnamese local language version. And if that's the case, then we will hope that we will be able to push you out to our 30 million plus users. And if we can reach even 10% of that, it's still 3 million users. So I still think that's a very good number. So this is lastly is some of the games we've actually taken to show you that I'm not, I'm not playing games with you. These are the games that we've taken so far. And number one is we're taking casual, social, free-to-play games with high monetization, right? So these are not games that we're taking where you play casually and you have a lot of fun and you can't make any money, right? We're trying to take casual games where there's competition, there's leadership boards, you can cooperate with friends, and you want to beat your friends, right? And for those if you're not sure, there's a fishing game, right? You've seen those. It's kind of like semi-gambling, but not really. And then we have running games, coffee game, and of course racing game. The second kind of game we're kind of taking is games that are proven in other markets. And have a strong IP. And we really we prefer obviously to have both of those, and no games are perfect, but the reason why we do this is usually in Vietnam, we can afford to be a little bit later in terms of licensing when you compare it to a market like Korea or Taiwan, because usually when a game is made, they'll license it out to some of the bigger markets first. And in Vietnam, we can sort of wait and see how the performance is and whether if this game has good numbers. We're going to ask you what's the ARPU, what's the paying rate, what's the retention rate, and we're going to be able to calculate from there how much money we can give you and how much percentage share we can give you. And really strongly, as you can see in markets now, IP is sort of like the determining factor, as the marketing costs and user acquisition costs are just skyrocketing right now. When you have a good IP, for example, we just recently launched a game called Thiên Long Bát Bộ, right? And it's a Chinese martial arts story that has really strong traction here in Vietnam as well. And just from organic, dominated more than 50% of our user acquisition without even spending a cent of money. So you can see how strong IP plays into that. As in terms of right now in Vietnam, I think you buying a user off Facebook, the install could be up to $1 to $2, and more than $2 even if you get high volume. So for us, we really value games which have a strong IP, where strong artwork, where something that's going to give you a strong selling point for your game. And you can see a lot of game IP works as well. Dota, right? Warcraft, all that stuff works. Okay, and that sort of sums up my speech. In Vietnam, you've got a lot of young users and a mobile gaming market that's ready to blow up. You've got strong local publishers who really understand the market. VNG, for our strong point, is that we're a strong platform with a lot of users, focused really with a lot of platforms that reach users across all different spaces. Vietnamese users still like games that are casual and easy to play. We will need games with lower phone specs as well too, because the smartphone market is just picking up. So some of the really high-end quality games we've seen from markets like the US or Japan, maybe only 10% of the gamers can play it, right? So you really have to check the specs before you come here. And lastly, Vietnamese players like competition, right? So if you're going to make a hardcore game, make sure it's very hardcore and that there's very deep monetization, and that once a player spends money on the game, he will be able to see that he will be able to beat somebody who hasn't spent money. And I think that's sort of the difference between the Asian market and the US or European market. Okay, so I'm open to any questions. I don't know if we have time.
Only for one question, because we're running out of schedule. So just one quick question, please. Well,
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, and hope you guys enjoy your time here in Vietnam.